friends. Today, in celebration of Earth Day, we are going to cook with our favorite garden vegetable, kale. We are going to make kale chips today for cooking class. So, the things you will need are kale, olive oil, and then some seasoning salt. You could use the seasoning salt we made a couple weeks ago for our market project, or if you have something like a Mrs. Dash, that is fine to use as well, and then regular salt. So the first thing I'm going to do is take 3 kale leaves and wash them in cold water. And then get as many of the drips off as I can, and then pat them dry with a paper towel. Next, I'm going to take the leaves off of the stem. So here's the green leafy part, and here's the hard stem. You can save the stem and chop it up into small pieces and put it in a salad. But for our kale chips, we just want these nice green leaves. I'm going to keep my pieces about this big. This is about 3 inches by 2 inches. You don't have to measure, but don't tear them up into tiny pieces. Keep them a nice size. Okay, there's my stem. I'm going to reserve, set aside to save for another use. All right, now that we have all of our kale in nice sized pieces, we are going to take 1 tablespoon of olive oil. I measured it out and put it in my ramekin so that I can have my ramekin right by my baking sheet. I'm dipping my fingers in the olive oil and massaging the olive oil into each piece of kale. It's really quite fun. Takes a little bit, so you have to be patient. Then I'm laying it on my baking sheet. Now, you can lay out parchment paper on your baking sheet. I choose to use a Silpat sheet because it's reusable. I just prefer that for my kitchen, but either one is fine. You will want to lay something out though because it does get the sheet a little greasy with all the olive oil. So just every piece at a time, dip your fingers in the olive oil and then massage the olive oil into the piece of kale. Friends, an alternative to using your fingers, if you don't want to do that, you could use a pastry brush and just dip it lightly in the olive oil and then brush it on. That is a choice. Okay, so now we have our baking dish with our kale laid out, just nicely spread out. And then you are going to take your seasoning salt or regular salt and sprinkle it all over your kale. The seasoning salt is going to stick to the kale because you've put oil all over it. I'm doing a light coating on one side. Okay, now it's ready for the oven. I've preheated the oven to 350 degrees. We're going to put it in for 10 minutes and then check on it. Flip each piece of kale over so that both sides of the kale get properly cooked. And then we'll cook it for another 10 to 15 minutes. We'll check on it. Let's put it in the oven. Okay, it's been 10 minutes, and I'm going to take the kale chips out and see how they're coming along. They're coming along along beautifully. So I'm going to take a tong and just flip every one of them over. They're already so crispy. Flip them over. You could also do this with a spatula. You could also ask an adult to do this because it is, the oven is hot, obviously. So flipping each of these over. And then putting them back in for another 10 minutes. And what we're looking for is a nice crispy kale chip. So the longer they're in the oven, they're gonna get nice and light and crispy. So we'll check them again in 10 minutes. After 6 minutes of that second timer, I started smelling them. They started smelling so good. So I've checked them. And they are done. I don't want these to get cooked any more past this. So the timing really depends on your oven and how hot it runs. So the total cook time for these kale chips was 16 minutes. 10 minutes on the first side and then 6 minutes on the second side. Now I'm gonna take them out, let them cool, and then eat them up for an afternoon snack. I hope you will make kale chips and think about Earth Day and think about the kale that we're going to be growing in our garden this summer. Happy Earth Day. Thanks for cooking with me.